Welcome. This is Rachel Chamness, your host of this channel, Sound Waves Heal, and this video is a spotlight for a master practitioner at Sound Waves Heal who has completed most or all of my courses and is a master channel. You'll find a new video almost every Saturday of a practitioner or a current student, as it's my mission to empower and uplift my students.
Good afternoon, fellow pilgrims. This is an exciting day, I think, that we are going to just kind of relax and allow Merlin to sort of tell us a story. So if you are here live, enjoy the story. Just show up and relax. Let what he says stir memories in you or questions. And first of all, most of you know me, but if you are new here, my name is April Lindevald. I have been a longtime TAG member and a TAG team member almost since the beginning of TAG team. I have been an intuitive counselor with cards and crystals and spiritual seeker and learner for many, many decades. And through the trance channeling classes that Rachel provides, I learned to channel and was connected with one of the heroes of my entire life, who is the great wizard Merlin, who most of us know from stories of Camelot and King Arthur, and who was also very important in the days of Atlantis and many other times of great learning and golden ages of the Earth's history. And he is now discarnate, but very involved with Earth's ascension process and is an aspect of Master Saint Germain, if that name means anything to some of you who study this, and is working very hard to help guide humanity towards a fifth dimensional and beyond ascension. We have channeled much information on a lot of things, but Rachel and I were speaking the other day, and she said, well, if you're in touch with Merlin, why don't you ask him about Camelot and how much of that is true and how much of it is fiction and what really happened and where it was and when it was and all kinds of things like that that we're inquiring minds want to know. So I spoke to him about that, and he tells me, many of you know that I come here every time I'm supposed to be on, and I say, well, Merlin, I don't know what we're supposed to do until the last minute. Merlin sort of dictates this. And basically, I was assuming we were going to speak about Camelot, and he was giving me like downloads of pictures and things about what things were like and what really happened. And I thought we were going to do that. And before I went to bed last night, I said, so we're going to do Camelot, right? And he said, no. And I was like, what do you mean, no? And I was panicking because now I didn't have any material. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. So usually he will, if that happens, he will usually sort of speak to me overnight while I'm asleep, and I'll wake up with ideas in my head and then no. So I trust that now. And when I woke up this morning, I laid in bed for a while, and all these things were happening, and it was about Camelot and Arthur. But then it went backwards, and it was like, well, before you know about Arthur, you have to know what happened before that, and you have to know Atlantis, and you have to know what happened before that, and you have to know why we did that, and you have to know when it really happened. And then he said to me, we're going to do this in 2 parts, because we may not get to the stuff about Camelot in part 1. So then I understood that's why he said no. Not no, it's that the story is bigger. And so what he said, let's speak as long as we can about the background of what's going on with the souls and the evolution of life on Earth. And we'll get as far as we can, and then we'll invite people to put down their questions about that material in the comments. And then when we proceed with more, when I come back with him, we will go further, but we will also attempt to address the questions that came in as best as he can. So that's what we're doing today. Okay, I am going to just do our little protection chain. Crystal in my hand. I have a bunch of crystals here, including a Merlinite, which is stone, which is supposed to be beloved to Merlin, and a new stone I just purchased, which is supposed to be to stimulate and also calm memories of Atlantis. It's called Atlantisite or something like that. And I have something else here that is supposed to be to stone, but I neglected to find out what the name of it is. But I liked it. All right. And so we call forth all the protection which can surround us and elevate us and lift us wherever we are in our personal spaces and in our group space, connected as we are through the ethers and through the mysteries of technology on the airway. Our protection keeps us elevated and in the highest possible vibration, open to the wisdom of the highest possible vibrational beings. protected from any astral muck, any energy vampires, any distractions, any heaviness, place or time or programming, attachments or cords. All of these things fade away as we raise into our soul bodies for learning, for healing, for connection, for oneness, to hear things which will stir our memories and remind us who we truly are, where we have been, and where we are going. To help us with this, we are surrounded by unicorns, the purest of pure and white and light, and dragons of earth, fire, air, and water, who surround us, lift us, and support us, and chase away any distraction, any heaviness, any negativity. We are surrounded by angels, archangels, and archai, particularly Metatron and Seraphine above us, to open our starseed gateways to wisdom and to the stream of our life's multidimensional beings, and Sandalphon and Shekinah to ground us deeply into our Earth Star chakras and beyond, into the temple in the Crystal City in the center of Gaia, so that we are fully in our bodies as well, and creatures of this beautiful Earth. And we are surrounded by Gabriel with his purified light, Michael with the sapphire blue, his protective and loving and wise and discerning blue flame and sword, Archangel Uriel in red, ruby red, with gold light cones, always there for us whenever we call for administration, for help, providing us with wisdom and information. And Archangel Raphael, the angel of abundance, of healing, of creativity, in green. Ariel, in light, beautiful, refreshing green. And Chamuel, to open our hearts, to open our heart centers with pink, gold, and white light, surrounding us with beautiful heart energy. And also Lord Azrael, the archangel of channelers, mediums, to help facilitate this communication so that ego does not get in the way and all is true and accurate as far as I can be an honest and pure channel. All right, with that in mind, I hope you are comfortable. I hope you are curious and relaxed. We will see what Merlin has to tell us. Greetings, my dear friends and students. There has been much discussion lately between many of you as you awaken your chakras, your DNA, your life stream strands, your memories of past lives. As you raise your vibration and your energy levels, it is natural for you to have flashes of memory, deep memory, coming from many, many lifetimes, many experiences that your soul has had over the millennia that this earth has been in existence. But these flashes are not complete, and there are so many other legends, and books, and plays, and performances, and things which take their inspiration from bits and pieces of the truth, of the facts, of the history. I will tell you that there is truth. There are kernels and sparks of truth, of actual memory in every fiction and fantasy that you will encounter, in the myths and the legends, the iconic stories, in television programs and films, in plays and books, and songs of old. These have come through artistic and creative minds with sparks of memory and channeling of information, but always through a glass darkly, as the Bible says, always colored and bent and twisted to suit the understandings, the level of knowledge and understanding, and also the agendas of the time in which they are created. For example, you ask about my beloved Arthur. Arthur was not the king at a time when your recorded history could speak of him, and yet the stories of him persist because of what he accomplished. But he was not 11th or 12th century or 15th century courtier with knights and ladies in beautiful gowns and headdresses. These are the mysteries that people wonder when they read about Arthur but do not see him listed in historical records. It is because later mythology colored the stories to match with what was familiar to the people reading them. And so the knights of the Round Table became knights that were familiar to those people. And the ladies in waiting became ladies in waiting that were familiar to those people. And Arthur became a defender of Christianity, which indeed he was not, for it had not come to the place where he functioned at that time. You see how I am explaining this disconnect in understanding of the stories. And yet we cannot dismiss these things as fiction. If you are listening to our colleague Megan's channeling several days ago of Edgar Casey, a very wise and elevated soul here on this side, who was a very adept channeler, he spoke eloquently about how Atlantis was not something that could be pinned down to a time and a place. We are in a multidimensional universe, and you are multidimensional beings, and Earth itself is a multidimensional planet, a multidimensional living, breathing being. And also things like timelines and pinpointing of time, moments, and space, a very limiting perception of what actually happens in the course of a planet's existence. And therefore, those who strive to nail down or find evidence of exactly when and where Atlantis existed, exactly when and where Camelot existed, or Avalon, or even Jesus and his disciples, there are clues, and yet you will fail eventually because there will not be a match with historical records because of the fact that there are times when we are talking about things that happened millennia before recorded history on the planet occurred, or in another dimension, or in another possible alternate reality or alternate Earth. You see, it is a very complex situation, and I will say that it is difficult for you all to grasp these things, or at least it has been up to this point. If you can imagine, for example, that old story of the blind man and the elephant, where an elephant stands and many blind men are told to go and put their hands upon the elephant and describe what the elephant is like. And they do not have any previous knowledge of elephants, per se. And so the one who grasps the ears says the elephant is flat and soft and warm, like a blanket. And the one who grasps the leg says the elephant is a thing like a tree trunk. And the one who grasps the tail says that the elephant is a sturdy rope. And they are all right for what they are perceiving, but they are all incorrect in terms of the entire picture. And so up to this point, mankind has understood these things in part, not wholly, not the entire story, and has tried very hard to put the information that they have got into the box of their understanding, which was very limited. We come to you today with more details because we see that all of you have opened so far, that your DNA, your chakras, your curiosity, your ability to spark memories that go back to your early lifetimes, early considering timelines. If we discount the timelines, they are just memories of all of the experiences that your soul is having simultaneously or in order. Again, complexity is too difficult to grasp with a small brain, but your brain is expanding. Your spiritual understanding is expanding. Your chakras are opening. Your memory of yourself as a multidimensional being, as a light creature who is existing in eternity and stepping down again and again to have wonderful experiences in the density of Earth, of other planets, and of flesh. As you open to these things, it is natural that your memories will begin to return to you. Your curiosity will begin to open, and your level of understanding of complex issues will expand. And so we feel it is the right time to begin to try to answer some of your questions, even if there will still be gaps. That being said, I will also add that anything that comes down to the human race as a beloved and revered myth or legend or story holds truth within it, especially stories which hold a core of hope, of love, of light, of an attempt to shine out of darkness, of an attempt to evolve from a place of misery and violence and low vibrational activities. Anything that offers a template, a memory, a hope, something to aspire for. These stories have come down for a reason. These stories of those who have made a difference in the past or in other timelines, places, they may be altered along the way to suit people's understanding or their ability to picture and imagine them. But they are preserved for the core of their message, for the message that they give to us today, showing us what is possible and what is right to strive for our futures. I do talk about how timelines are useless, and yet there is a paradox here because there is a part of your history which is not yet written, and that is this plan for you to ascend. The plan is in place, and yet it is accomplished and yet accomplished. There are still possibilities of choice because of free will. There are still possible delays and possible obstacles and possible jump starts and wonderful speeding up and acceleration, depending on the choices that people make, and especially that people such as you make, who are bright souls leading the way. And so in that sense, there is a future that is yet unknown. The ultimate plan is always known to source, and yet the way there is an adventure which you create. Does that make some sort of sense to you? And so I have said that we could not cover things about Camelot, truths about Camelot and Arthur and myself, without starting at the beginning, without going back further, without speaking of Atlantis, without speaking of the time before that, the time in between, and the time after. I will say that most of you know me, Merlin, the great wizard, from stories of Camelot and Arthur. You know me as Arthur's teacher, as someone who, if you have delved into the stories, was instrumental in his conception, in his growth, development, in his education, and who counseled him far into his kingship, and then, unfortunately, left him alone at a crucial moment when things were collapsing. This is the story. And this is how you know me, and therefore you see me as very ancient, with a long beard and white hair, and the wisdom of many, many years, and somewhat supernatural, having the powers of magic, powers which are described variously, and some of which are true, and some of which are expanded to things that I laugh to hear, because no human being could ever have some of those powers. And yet, I am a magician, I am a sorcerer and a wizard, but in such a way that all of you may aspire to become. The reason that most of you know me from this lifetime I describe is because it was the last time that I took a life in the body, in flesh. It was the last incarnation that I had, long, long, long ago. The last lifetime where I was incarnate and limited by flesh. And therefore, it is how I am remembered, even though there was much that came before that. And that I, too, was young at some point, and green, and fallible. I am still fallible, but I have learned a great deal over the millennia. Yes, I have always been involved in your history and always very passionately connected with the progress of mankind. Even though I have not taken on a body, I have guided and helped and assisted and taught from this place outside of the physical body where I can do more good and where I am not limited by loss of memory and by a lack of connection to source energy. I have ways sometimes of appearing to people. I have the ability, and these are some of the magic tricks that I can do. I can overshadow someone and walk in their body with them, alongside their souls for a time. I may speak through them. I may full body channel them, or I may channel as I'm doing now, which is to just speak through someone who is still here. I can work with you energetically. I am always listening, but I am frequently standing beside many of you, supporting you, whispering in your ear, just outside the reach of your physical senses, and yet sometimes within the reach of your psychic senses. Many of you already know this, but I digress so that you understand who I am, where I have been, how I have credibility to tell you of these things. I will now go and start from the beginning. Our Earth, a beautiful jewel in the cosmos, one of the most priceless and admired works of the Source Creator's mind, has been in existence for many millennia. Your scientists try to trace its physical existence back. They postulate about its formation from Big Bang and cooling and many, many different types of life evolving slowly upon its surface. There is much truth in what they discover, but there is also another part of the story which precedes written history or history that can be deduced by means. You must know that the history of your Earth has been rather a roller coaster, perfectly created in conception. Some of the original souls who made the pilgrimage to experience the Earth were highly evolved, bright soul beings who were fully aware of their multidimensional aspect and who volunteered under the auspices of Archangel Michael to come and people this Earth and explore the beauty of being in a physical body, albeit the physical body which vibrated at a very high level and which had all of its DNA and all of its 12 chakras wide open and connected with the life stream of your soul being, your eternal being. You walked lightly upon the earth and experienced the physical pleasures of sensory delight, of taste and smell, of touch, of the sight of colors and textures, the hearing of song and music, the symmetry of sacred geometry that echoed in every piece of creation and all of the life which bloomed on this planet. As always, from the very beginning, the experiment was and is still an open-ended experiment of finding the balance of how to keep the eternal light of source and soul vibrant and pure while stepping it down as densely as possible to be able to appreciate and experience the wonders of sensory input. This is what Source wished to experience. And along the way, there's been a story of long periods of beautiful golden interaction and balance and harmony between the denizens of Earth and the planet. But always, as things became denser and emotions became more intense and egos became more in charge, problems would erupt. Jealousies, rivalries, competition, fears, thoughts of not enough. These are the things that come out of intensified emotional experience and density and the interaction with need for physical sustenance. And so there have been many falls and many resurrections of the human race. You must also understand that this is not a timeline of one race that just has its ups and downs, but there have been many races that were seeded from star systems who were older and wanted to participate in this experiment. All souls are one. All souls are beings of light, energy, but some souls have had much experience in other planetary systems and other kinds of cultures, which they brought along with them, and yet the elements of Earth itself needed to be used to create the template of physicalness. And so other star systems would come and seed the Earth using what they found on Earth, using the elements, the blueprints of physical form. And this was true for animals and plants as well as for sentient human type beings. And so at any given moment in the Earth's history, there were some very, very evolved, highly spiritually connected beings, and then there were other beings which had come from other places who were still on their evolutionary path and had forgotten their soul origins and were still getting used to being physical and connected with their soul selves and still evolving in a way that we find primitive or early evolution of mankind, I suppose. So there was all sorts of crossover here. There were times when, for example, some of the beings who were the earliest beings to set foot here, who were very connected with their spirituality, vibrated in such a high vibrational way that they were virtually invisible to the other denizens of Earth. They would appear occasionally in step-down forms, and they would be perceived as gods and goddesses. They participated with Gaia in the creation of beautiful, lush forms, plant life and animal life. They interacted with galactic visitors, and they interacted with angels, and they enjoyed the beautiful results of their creativity, but they did not necessarily descend into very fleshly forms that could always be perceived or touched. Some of them fell from grace and became denser and became disconnected bit by bit from their centers. Some of them were saddened by the fall and what they saw and left this planet for other places or for energetic realms. In between, we have experiences such as Lemuria and Atlantis, where it was attempted to find the balance, the perfect balance of being in harmony, of shining brightly, of being connected to soul and to source, of having all 12 chakras open and functioning, and then being still physical, truly physical, which Atlantis was, using the crystals of the earth, the sacred geometry of earth, having relationship with creatures of the earth, respectful reverence for life, reverence for plant and animal life, and interaction with them, but while still being able to interact with visiting galactics and to work with angels and unicorns and dragons, other energies that were from higher dimensional places, higher dimensional levels. This actually Atlantean experiment lasted a good 1,500 years. That is a very, very long time in your history. And the island itself, or the place itself, as I have said before, would be hard to pinpoint on your planet because it existed in a bubble that was in a slightly higher vibrational field that you could perceive. So it's not exactly a physical place. It was sort of in a halfway place between the vibration you're experiencing now in your world and the vibration of the earliest people on Earth who hardly stepped foot into the actual density. But they had achieved a good balance for a long time. And then, inevitably, as seems to happen every time, there were some who wanted to explore more and more dense experiences, and this took them away from their understanding of harmony, perfection, and eroded the fabric of the society. As more and more people experience fear and lust and greed, there are imbalances that take place. There is violence that erupts. There is competition. Competition comes from fear of not having enough. There is a lust for power. People who wish to be in control, and control also comes from fear of not having all you need or unless you are in control. So we will not dwell on this too long, but you understand that Atlantis was a place in perfect balance for a very long time. But gradually, a little at a time, the light began to dim and fade, and there were more people who were born in fear, without as much knowledge or understanding of time-honored precepts, chakras beginning to cloud over and close, some of the DNA beginning to corrode so that the purity of bloodlines that carried soul memories was compromised. And this eventually caused the demise of the entire experiment. Many of you have memories of both the good and the bad times in this. The bad times sometimes have more cogent memories because they are traumatic and because they cause you pain. Some of these memories are surfacing now to be purged and healed and cleansed. It is not for you to obsess about the downfall and mistakes with whatever side you were on, whether you were victimized or whether you were one of those who caused problems. It does not matter now. This was all in the past. And the memories are only there to assure you that you are an ancient being who has already experienced many, many lifetimes of joy and of trauma, and can learn from each of these experiences. Your memories are there to teach you that you are an eternal being and that you have choice and that you are not just what you think you are in this particular body and personality in this lifetime. But they are not to torture you or traumatize you. And so we tell you that, as many of you know, there were many refugees who left Atlantis either before things became devastating or at the very end. And some of these people were priests and priestesses or highly evolved souls, gathered things that they thought would help them to keep alive the wisdom of the ages that had already been, would keep alive the memory of who humanity truly was, would keep alive some of the rituals, the magic, the skills and abilities, the healing abilities, the technologies. Some of these things were saved, and some of them were committed to memory. And these refugees scattered across the world. And in the world they found themselves, there were already evolving new threads of life, of human life, that had been seeded from many star systems, new sorts of creatures and animals, new sorts of plant life, new sorts of developing climatic and environmental areas that they had to adjust to. Now, these refugees from Atlantis, and I was one, and some of you were among the refugees, were blessed because of our origins and our healing techniques with extraordinarily long lives. And so a lifetime for us was not 80 years or 40 years. It may be hundreds of years. In some cases, some of us refreshed and rejuvenated ourselves with the light in ways that you do not understand, and we were able to stay in original bodies for thousands of years. This is something that I can claim. When I left Atlantis, I was a mature person who had experienced many lifetimes and also a very long life as a spiritual leader, as a priest, a high priest, but I was able to learn to extend my life to several thousand years. It is difficult for you to understand this, but cells are cells, and they can be replaced and regenerated if one knows how to keep them safe and pure, and one knows how to heal, bring forth the energetic beams of light which can heal and regenerate. These are techniques that to some extent you will be learning very soon in your fifth dimensional ascension. I do not promise you thousands of years, but I do promise you an extension of your physical lifetimes. For me, it was very important to stay alive in the knowledge that I had. What I saw around me was that many of my colleagues who decided to pass over or were killed in various incidents, accidents, or allowed themselves to age and depart, they could come back in new lifetimes, but there were some decisions made at a higher level as councils of great masters and great angelic beings connected to source saw the dangers to the planet that what had happened in Atlantis foretold. And so after these falls, it was decided that new life on Earth would be shut down from its knowledge of the technology of Atlantis, which had been misused, which had been misqualified. And so several strands of DNA in all of humanity and many of the higher chakras were shut down and veiled until it was deemed that humanity had evolved and progressed enough to be able to handle the knowledge, the energetic and technological advances without using them incorrectly for violent or self-interested goals. I was unwilling to surrender the knowledge, the skills, energy which I had long studied and worked to achieve. And so I did not allow myself to pass from the earth physically. Do you understand? It was a choice. I felt I could trust myself to be as well-intentioned as a person can possibly be, and that I felt that the earth was in great need of a few of us who might bring the old techniques, the old abilities, the old ways, the old wisdom with us. And it was in danger of being forgotten, and the earth would be plunged into darkness. I am not, well, perhaps I did have some ego. Humans always have ego. And yet I do believe that beyond ego was the desire to do good, the desire to be among the lights who was able to guide humanity forward in a positive and upward leaning direction. And so from then on, many of us continued to keep alive the rituals, the technology, the spirit of Atlantis, wherever we had landed. But over the course of many centuries, our number dwindled, and we looked for opportunities to find souls who were on the verge of remembering, because, as I said, your history is a history of crash and rebuild, of roller coaster, of fall and rise again. And this time, the rising was about souls who particularly came here with more memory and more potential for growth and evolution, more wisdom, and the ability to be nurtured, to be leaders for good. There were many, many centuries of brutal, dark, very rough times. Humans were ruled by fear and ego in many cases. Might made right. Power was enforced with violence. People took what they felt they needed, and they did not have a thought for a larger community in many cases. There was much brutality, very little cooperation, although there were communities that did evolve, which exhibited more of a cooperative bent, but they were at the mercy of those who came to invade from other places, who took advantage of their supposed weakness to kill and steal, to pillage. It was a very difficult time to have faith in humanity's ultimate evolution. And yet, those of us who still existed from the old times created pockets of wisdom where we kept the records of what we knew to be civilization, the ideas of harmony, ideas of beauty, ideas of higher thought, cooperation, oneness, respect and reverence for all life and for one another. The nurturing of abilities and of thought. And we kept these candles alive all across the globe in various places. One such place was Egypt, of course, and from there, Greece, and even later Rome. There were places in Africa. There were various islands of civilization and the flame of old wisdom across Europe. But my own experience goes into the British Isles, where I was deeply involved with Stonehenge and Avalon. And since I still was in my original form, and this is hard to find words, I had disciplined my being to be able to transcend the limitations of human flesh so that I could stop aging, I could appear and disappear, move between the dimensions, I could transmute elements and items, and there were several of us who could do such things. We hid the island of Avalon from the casual observer with energetic and multidimensional tricks. And so the legends of Avalon being a mystical island which only appeared when one was pure of heart or one came very, very near in a boat are somewhat true. We did use our magic to keep it safe from, well, you know what the Vikings did to many monasteries and communities of spirit. And there were, before that even, marauding bands who did violence to those who eschewed violence. And so we kept ourselves safe, and we kept the knowledge safe, and we kept the rituals safe. There were male and female. The priestesses of Avalon were directly descended from the rites of Atlantis. And we had some of the crystal and equipment, some healing equipment. We had knowledge of apothecary and plant life, which we expanded as we explored our new areas, learned of what was available to us for natural healing. We practiced energetic healing. We practiced meditation. We searched for wisdom and peace, keeping ourselves connected with soul every day and keeping peace in our hearts with everything we were seeing on the outside was a daily chore that needed to be attended to. It was work to keep from descending into the general atmosphere and energy of Earth at the time. I am speaking for hundreds of years now, through what some of you might call the Dark Ages, the turn of the century. Meanwhile, well, I will go to that later. In other places of the world, somewhere in that pause between Atlantis and Avalon, things were happening in the Middle East, and the being you know as Jesus also was born in magical circumstances that were orchestrated by Source and the angels and the councils on high and the masters. I mention this because it will come to play later when I speak of Arthur. The idea was that the councils wished not to abandon the experiment of Earth, but yet to try to lead humans to a new awakening, a renaissance, an opening of their eyes, all of their eyes, including their spiritual eyes, third, to remember, to find the core of their being, the peace and the connection with the eternal. And in order to do that, it was decided to bring forth bright lights, souls of great experience, souls of great accomplishment and discipline who had risen to high vibrational levels, who volunteered to step themselves down into flesh, to be teachers, to be living examples, to show what was possible if one lived a life in flesh, but from the place of heart, from the place of light, from the place of love. These beautiful beings, these masters, great masters, these teachers, these wise ones. I do not count myself among them because I was one who continued in my Atlantean body. I tried as best as I could to be a leader, a teacher, a wise one, a helper. But these masters are above my level of ability at that time. The soul that you know as Jesus embodied the Christ light so perfectly in his short incarnation that he made such a difference in the world. It may be said that his ministry in 33 years was a failure as it ended in his death, and yet he transcended death. He was able to show that the physical body is only a costume, is a temporary container for the soul being, the light body, which all of you and all of us exist in. He was able to transcend reactionary action to abuse, to violence. He was able to embody forgiveness, peace, oneness, healing, so far as to bring the energies of God through his own hands to heal the sick and sometimes even the recently deceased. He was able to show those that were closest to him his true light self and even some of his embodiments in other times. This was truly a very, very great soul. And even though his time on earth was short, his message survived for many, many thousands of years, and so his teaching was tremendously successful. Now, there are caveats to that because, of course, as I said before, each generation takes the message, the story, and the facts and twists it into a myth or a story that suits its own purposes. And so the message of Jesus, who embodied the Christ light, has been twisted and used in very, very negative ways and misqualified into energies that are not what was intended originally. And yet, somehow, the story, the core of love for all of humankind, persists, manages to shine forth despite attempts at twisting it to other agendas. And there have been others, been seeded throughout the centuries, other leaders, other teachers, other great souls who brought light into the world and set examples. And those who looked up and listened, the Buddha, Muhammad, leaders from Eastern Asian traditions, and even smaller, less remembered, but equally powerful beings who always, always espoused love and harmony as their primary directing forces. And each of them touched a few people who were paying attention, and those people touched others. And therefore, little by little, by little by little, humanity began to find itself again. And so with these things in mind, you will understand how important it has been always in a place which had reached a nadir of darkness, of turmoil, of despair, of privation and inequality, and on an earth that always provided all that was needed for life, for harmony, for abundance. It was so important to create circumstances where someone came to light the way at intervals, some bright soul. Sometimes it was a soul who came from above, who lighted the way, who was given extraordinary grace and power. And sometimes it was someone who started with the ability to learn and grow and remember, who needed to be guided to the place of ultimate understanding. And this was even more powerful in some ways because it was an example of humanity as it was then waking up and making conscious choices to do something differently. such was the case with Arthur. I was in touch with angels and masters still, and there was a push for me to assist, which I was happy to do, in bringing wisdom of the ancients, the wisdom of Atlantis, to a being who was coming through in the area where I was, who could bring a new way of existing in community, a new kind of civilization to this place in England, who had the potential. And I was to be the teacher, the guardian, the mentor, the protector of this soul, who would make a difference, who would show that it was not necessary always to live through cruelty and the survival of the fittest and the concept that makes right. And this is what happened when it was time for Arthur to make his appearance. I will now let the channel check our clock. Yes, it has been an hour, and I wish to stop here so that we can start fresh in 2 weeks with the story of Camelot. I'm hoping that I was clear and helpful in your understanding of all that leads to this moment in history, but I am perfectly happy and willing to answer questions that may come up or things that you may remind me I have omitted or not explained clearly. And so if you will write in this thread, so to speak, your questions or your additional curiosities, we will consider them for the next channeling when we address Camelot in particular and the times after, and when we try to answer the questions you have about what we have channeled today. We hope this has been of interest to you and that it has sparked your own memories and your own thoughts of who you truly are and where you are headed as well, and how you can be of service in rising the population of this planet to its rightful place in the universe in perfect balance between the energies of love and soul and the energies of physical pleasure and sensory delight. It has been balanced before, it can be again, and it will be again, better than ever, more perfect than it has ever been accomplished. And the time is nigh. You are all part of the way forward. Do not despair. You are at the crucial moments where things seem to be descending into darkness, and yet this is not the case. It is merely the clearing of the thunderclouds for the sun to break through. Hold on. We are here beside you in legionary numbers, every kind of energy that can assist and hold you. But the true work can only be done from where you are. And so we hold your hand, we applaud you, we lend you our powerful support and love for all of the plunging forward that you do, despite all the obstacles that you face. Even though I have not been in a body for millennia, once one lives upon the earth, it is not possible to forget both the intense joys of being a physical being and also the miseries and the struggles and the pain. One is worth the other, certainly, but you must know we understand that there are times when things seem to be overwhelming and heavy. This is when we hope you will call upon us to lift your burdens and help you clear the energies and attract all of the assistance that you need. We send you our love and appreciation always, because it is with great excitement that I anticipate a new golden age, better than ever before, and the culmination of so many thousands of years of my efforts and dreaming, and the efforts and dreaming of so many, and of Source itself. Until we meet again. Okay, that was a lot. That was a lot to digest, and I think you stopped at a good place because, God, the hour goes by, boom, like that. I don't even know where it goes. I hope that this was good for you, and I hope that some of you are there, and that you will come back again in 2 weeks to hear part 2, and that you will think of some things that you want him to address that maybe weren't clear or that you would like something more in depth on. In the meantime, I wish you all a beautiful week, beautiful 2 weeks, and always remember that you're never alone, no matter what you're dealing with right now. And reach for joy. Take care.